If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's continue. Henry Morgan checked his designer watch for the third time in the last 5 minutes. The meeting with foreign investors had extended beyond what was planned, and now he was stuck in the chaotic traffic of Madison Avenue in New York City. At 38 years old, the real estate entrepreneur ran one of the most successful development companies in the country, with projects spread across major American cities. Professional success, however, came with a price: sleepless nights, a suffocating schedule, and superficial relationships that never lasted more than a few months. His driver, Samuel, was trying to navigate around the congestion through alternative streets when Henry felt his stomach growl. He had skipped lunch to attend an urgent video conference and was now feeling the effects of hunger. "Samuel, stop somewhere around here. I need to eat something." "But sir, dinner with the ambassador is in 2 hours. I won't make it until then. Stop at any decent restaurant you can find." Samuel nodded, and a few minutes later parked in front of a small establishment in the Greenwich Village area. The simple facade, with the name Tastes of Home hand-painted, wasn't the type of place Henry usually frequented, but hunger spoke, louder than his refined habits. Upon entering, he was greeted by the inviting aroma of home cooking and the welcoming buzz of lively conversations. The rustic environment, decorated with colorful paintings and plants, conveyed an authenticity he hadn't experienced in a long time. He chose a discreet table in the corner, and while checking messages on his phone, heard a melodious voice that immediately caught his attention. "Good afternoon. Welcome to Tastes of Home. Can I help with any menu suggestions?" Henry looked up and found himself facing a smile that completely disarmed him. The young waitress, with her curly hair tied in an unpretentious bun and amber-colored eyes, radiated an energy that contrasted with everything he knew in his social circle. Her name tag read, Julia. "It's your first time here, isn't it?" she asked, noticing his impeccable suit and luxury watch. "You look a bit out of place." The direct observation, instead of offending him, provoked a genuine smile in Henry. There was something refreshing about the way she addressed him, without the flattery he was accustomed to. "Is it that obvious?" "Let's just say we don't get many Wall Street executives around here," she joked. "Our specialty is authentic Southern cuisine. If you trust me, I suggest the house special with a lemongrass lemonade." Henry felt intrigued, not just by the suggestion, but mainly by this woman's spontaneity. He decided to accept the recommendation, and while waiting, observed how Julia interacted with other customers, with the same sincere attention she had dedicated to him, but with a familiarity that suggested she knew each person's story. She alternated between serving tables and helping an elderly man who seemed to be the cook, probably her father or grandfather. When the meal arrived, Henry was surprised by the comforting flavor he hadn't experienced in ages. Each forkful brought memories of a simplicity he had left behind in his climb to success. While eating, he couldn't help but follow Julia's movements around the restaurant, the way she laughed with regular customers, how she hummed quietly while taking orders. At the end of the meal, when she brought the check, Henry couldn't resist. "What does a young woman like you do besides working in this restaurant?" Julia seemed momentarily surprised by the direct question, but answered naturally. "I study visual arts at NYU in the mornings, work here in the afternoons to help my family, and at night I paint." Her eyes sparkled when mentioning painting. "And you? What do you do besides wearing expensive suits and looking eternally rushed?" The response caught him off guard. He wasn't used to being questioned this way. People usually wanted to impress him, not get to know him. He hesitated, realizing he didn't have an interesting answer. "I work. A lot." "Just that?" she gently provoked. "No hobbies? No passions?" Henry let out a bitter laugh. "I think I lost those along the way." "It's never too late to rediscover," Julia replied, with a smile that seemed to hold secrets of the universe. "Come back any day. Maybe next time you'll tell me something beyond your work." He left a generous tip, and exited the restaurant feeling something he couldn't name. As Samuel drove toward the next appointment, Henry couldn't get the image of Julia out of his head, her genuine smile and the uncomplicated way she approached life. The following week, contrary to his meticulously planned routine, Henry returned to tastes of home. He convinced himself it was just for the exceptional food, but he knew, deep down, that he was seeking that sense of authenticity he had experienced in Julia's presence. This time he arrived earlier and found the restaurant less crowded. Julia recognized him immediately and led him to the same table as his previous visit. "The Wall Street executive returned," she joked. "Ready to tell me something beyond your work today?" The conversation flowed with surprising ease. Henry told her about his childhood in Virginia, how he had left a small town to build his empire in New York, and how sometimes he missed the simplicity of his origins. Julia, in turn, talked about her dream of putting together an exhibition with her canvases, the financial difficulties her family had faced since her father fell ill, and how the restaurant, which belonged to her parents, was going through hard times. "May I see your work someday?" Henry asked, genuinely interested. Julia's face lit up. "I have some canvases in the storage room right here. If you want, I can show you after the crowd thins out." When the restaurant emptied, she took him to a small room in the back, which served as storage and apparently her improvised studio. The walls were covered with vibrant canvases that portrayed urban scenes of New York with a unique perspective. There was something magical in the way she captured the chaotic yet poetic essence of the metropolis. "This is extraordinary," Henry murmured, genuinely impressed. "You have an incredible talent, Julia." "Jules," she corrected. "My friends call me Jules." That simple phrase, the implicit inclusion in her circle of close people, provoked a wave of warmth in Henry's chest. As he observed the canvases, feeling increasingly drawn into this young woman's artistic universe, he realized that something had changed within him. The suffocating routine, the endless commitments, the superficial relationships, everything seemed distant in that small storage room transformed into a gallery. As he said goodbye, he promised to return. And for the first time in years, he made a change to his schedule, not out of necessity, but out of desire. Henry Morgan, the relentless businessman, had found something, or someone, that finally made him question whether the path he had chosen was really the one he wanted to follow. In the weeks that followed, Henry reorganized his routine to include regular visits to Tastes of Home. What began as an occasional deviation in his path became a ritual he awaited with growing anxiety. His personal assistant, Mark, began to notice subtle changes in his boss's behavior. Strategically rescheduled meetings for late afternoon, a discreet smile that appeared when checking the clock near lunchtime, and a lightness he hadn't shown in a long time. "Do you have any important commitments today in the afternoon?" Mark asked one Thursday, after Henry declined a business lunch with a foreign investor. "Nothing that appears on the official schedule," Henry replied with a half-smile while signing some documents. "Just a personal market research." The truth was that Henry had discovered that Thursdays were the days when the restaurant was less busy, allowing for longer conversations with Julia. With each meeting, he felt more fascinated by the unique perspective she had of the world. The way Jules, as he now called her, talked about colors, textures, and the beauty found in the simplest things transported him to a reality he had never explored. That afternoon, upon arriving at the restaurant, he noticed that Julia seemed worried as she served the few occupied tables. Her usual smile was present, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Did something happen?" Henry asked when she came to serve him. Jules hesitated for a moment, but something in Henry's genuinely concerned expression made her open up. "My father had to be hospitalized yesterday. His blood pressure went out of control again." She sighed, running her hand through her hair. "And to top it off, we received a notification from the bank today. If we don't settle the loan we took for the restaurant renovations, we could lose everything." The vulnerability in her gaze hit Henry like a punch to the stomach. Accustomed to solving business problems with the coldness of someone who moves numbers in spreadsheets, he felt powerless in the face of this family's real suffering. "I'm saying," "Sorry, Jules, is there anything I can do to help?" She shook her head, forcing a smile. "Thank you, but these are family problems. We'll figure it out." Abruptly changing the subject, she asked, "The usual today? House special with lemongrass lemonade?" Henry nodded, respecting her attempt to maintain dignity. As he watched her walk away, an idea began to form in his mind. As an influential businessman, he had contacts in the banking system who could facilitate the renegotiation of the Santos family's loan, but something prevented him from offering this help directly. Perhaps the fear that Julia would interpret it as an attempt to impress her, or worse, to exert some kind of power over her. That night, after returning to his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, Henry made some calls. Using his prestigious law firm as an intermediary, he arranged for the family's loan to be renegotiated on much more favorable terms, without his identity being revealed. He also arranged for the medical expenses of Julia's father to be mysteriously covered by a social program at the hospital. The following week, when he returned to the restaurant, he was greeted by a radiant Julia, completely transformed from their previous meeting. "You won't believe what happened," she exclaimed as soon as she saw him, unable to contain her excitement. "It was like a miracle. The bank offered us incredible conditions to renegotiate the loan, and the hospital informed us that my father's treatments are covered by a program we didn't even know existed." The genuine happiness on her face was all the reward Henry needed. He felt a warmth in his chest that he hadn't experienced in a long time, the sensation of doing something truly meaningful for someone. "That's wonderful, Jules," he replied, disguising his involvement. "It seems the universe conspired in your favor. Do you know what this means?" She sat down quickly across from him, her eyes shining with excitement. "Now I can save money for the exhibition I've always dreamed of. In fact," Julia lowered her voice as if sharing a secret, "a gallery downtown contacted me after seeing my online portfolio. They're interested in including some of my canvases in a collective exhibition next month." The way her face lit up when talking about her artistic dreams was hypnotizing. Henry realized he was smiling more in her presence than at all the social events and business meetings of recent years. "This deserves a celebration," he suggested. "How about letting me take you to see the exhibition at the Met this weekend? I heard there's an incredible work by contemporary American artists." The suggestion caught Julia by surprise. It was the first time Henry had proposed meeting her outside the restaurant. She hesitated for a moment, and he feared he had crossed some invisible boundary between them. "It's not a, romantic date," he quickly added, feeling strangely nervous. "Just two friends appreciating art." Julia smiled, and Henry realized he would prefer it to be a date, but didn't dare correct himself. "I'd love to," she finally replied. "Sunday afternoon I'm free." Sunday arrived with an expectation Henry hadn't felt since adolescence. He chose more casual clothes than his usual suits, opting for a linen shirt and dark pants. Meeting Julia at the museum entrance, he realized he had never seen her outside the restaurant uniform. She wore a simple dress printed with small flowers, her hair loose framing her face in a cascade of curls. She was stunning in her simplicity. The afternoon at the museum proved to be a transformative experience. Henry, accustomed to seeing art as investment and status, rediscovered the pleasure of simply appreciating beauty and expression. Julia's insightful comments about the works, her unique vision of techniques and meanings, showed him a world that had always been there, but that he had never really known how to see. "You see things in a way I never imagined," he commented, as they observed a contemporary installation. "That's because you're used to seeing the world in terms of market value," she replied without judgment, merely stating a fact. "I see it in terms of emotions, stories, possibilities." That observation hit him with the force of a revelation. This was exactly what was missing in his life, the ability to see beyond pragmatism, to connect with the world through emotions. After the museum, they walked through the historic center of New York, discovering small galleries and hidden cafes that Julia knew. In one of these stops, sitting at a sidewalk table having coffee, the conversation flowed into more personal territories. "Why is someone like you so interested in someone like me?" Julia suddenly asked, her eyes fixed on the cup. "We're from completely different worlds." The question caught Henry off guard. "What do you mean by someone like you?" "Come on, Henry," she smiled with a mixture of amusement and seriousness. "Your watch probably costs more than everything my family owns. You run companies, attend gala events, travel the world. I'm an art student who waits tables to pay for college." Henry felt a tightness in his chest. The reality of the social differences between them, which he had been trying to ignore, became impossible to deny. "Maybe that's exactly why," he replied after a moment of reflection. "In your world, I found something that doesn't exist in mine: authenticity. You live genuinely. Jules, you create art that means something. You connect genuinely with people. In my world, everything is calculated, strategic, superficial." The sincerity of the response seemed to disarm Julia. She was about to say something when her cell phone rang. When she checked the message, her expression completely changed. "Everything okay?" Henry asked, noticing her sudden change in mood. "It's Richard," she replied, putting the phone away with visible discomfort. "My ex, he's back from London and wants to meet." The name fell like a stone between them, bringing a reality that Henry preferred to ignore. Julia had a life, connections and history that existed long before he walked into tastes of home. And now a figure from her past threatened to further complicate the delicate connection they were building. "How long ago did you break up?" 6 months, she replied, avoiding his gaze. "He received a scholarship to study gastronomy in London, and we decided to end things. But now he's back and—" Her voice faltered. "It's complicated." That afternoon, which had started with so much promise, ended with a cloud of uncertainty hanging over them. Henry dropped Julia off at her home, a small apartment in a middle-class neighborhood, with the feeling that something had changed. The ghost of an ex-boyfriend freshly arrived from London was just a reminder of the many complications that could arise in that unlikely connection between a millionaire businessman and an artist waitress. Richard Peterson returned to New York with the confidence of someone who believes the world has patiently awaited his return. After 6 months studying gastronomy in London, he came back with an international diploma and ambitious plans. The first of these to win back Julia Evans, the woman he had left behind in the name of his career. What Richard didn't expect was to find a Julia different from the insecure young woman he had known. In the weeks following his return, his attempts to get close again were met with a distant cordiality that left him disconcerted. The Jules he knew had always welcomed him with open arms, forgiving his flaws with an understanding smile. Now, something had changed. "You seem different," he commented during a coffee, after insisting for days that she agree to see him. More confident. "People change, Richard," she replied, absently stirring her cup. 6 months is enough time for a lot to happen." "It's because of that guy, isn't it? The businessman who's been showing up at the restaurant." The question caught Julia by surprise. She didn't know Richard had been observing her interactions with Henry. "Henry is just a friend," she replied, although the blush on her cheek suggested something more complex. "And even if he wasn't, it wouldn't be any of your business. We broke up, remember?" Richard laughed bitterly. "We broke up because I needed to go to London. Now I'm back, and I thought we could pick up where we left off." "Life doesn't work that way," Julia replied, feeling a confidence she didn't recognize in herself. "I can't just pause my feelings, my plans, my life, and resume them when it's convenient for you." The firmness in her voice surprised them both. 6 months earlier, Julia would have given in, accepting Richard's terms with the gratitude of someone receiving a second chance. Now something had awakened in her, an awareness of her own worth that made it impossible to return to the old pattern. Meanwhile, Henry faced his own dilemmas. Richard's presence in Julia's life brought to the surface insecurities that the businessman thought he had overcome long ago. In his corporate world, he was used to controlling variables, predicting outcomes, mitigating risks. But the territory of feelings was unpredictable and frighteningly new. On a particularly busy afternoon at the office, while reviewing contracts for a new development in the west side of New York, Henry was interrupted by his assistant. "Mr. Morgan, Mrs. Oliveira from the Cultural Foundation is on the line. Says it's about the sponsorship program for emerging artists. Henry hesitated for a moment. He had donated a significant amount to the foundation with the specific condition that they include Julia among the artists selected for the next collective exhibition. It was a well-intentioned gesture, a way to help her realize her dream without exposing his interference. But now, preparing to take the call, he felt uncomfortable with the veiled manipulation. "Henry, we have great news," announced Mariana. Oliveira from the other end of the line. "The curator loved Julia Evans's portfolio. She would have been selected even without your suggestion. Her work really stands out among young artists." An unexpected relief ran through Henry's body. Knowing that Julia's talent was genuinely recognized, regardless of his influence, brought a satisfaction different from any successful business deal he had ever closed. "That's excellent," he replied, feeling both proud and ashamed of his unnecessary interference. "When will the exhibition Priosi? In 3 weeks. We'll send the formal invitation to Ms. Evans today." After hanging up, Henry remained contemplative in his Italian leather chair, observing the panoramic view of New York through the windows of his office on Park Avenue. The city, with its skyline of skyscrapers and the contrast between luxury and poverty, seemed to reflect his own internal division. On one side, the calculating businessman, accustomed to using his power and influence to shape outcomes. On the other, a man rediscovering his humanity, learning to value genuine connections above strategic advantages. That same afternoon, at Tastes of Home, Julia received the envelope from the Cultural Foundation with trembling hands. Her mother, Donna Emily, attentively observed her daughter open the correspondence while organizing the condiments for dinner. "They selected me," Julia shouted, jumping with the envelope in her hands. "Mom, I'm going to exhibit at the Cooper Gallery. It's one of the most prestigious spaces in the city." Donna Emily hugged her daughter with tears in her eyes. Since her husband had fallen ill, she rarely saw that gleam of happiness in Julia's face. Between college, work at the restaurant, and financial worries, the young woman had sacrificed much of her youth to keep the family afloat. "Your father will be so proud when he finds out," murmured the lady, wiping away tears. "You deserve this, my daughter." The doorbell announced the arrival of a customer, interrupting the moment. Julia turned to attend, and her smile widened upon recognizing Henry. Without thinking twice, she ran to him and hugged him impulsively, catching him completely off guard. "I was selected for the exhibition at the Cooper Gallery," she exclaimed, showing the envelope. "I can't believe this is really happening." Henry smiled, genuinely happy for her, even carrying the weight of knowing he had interfered in the process. Julia's authentic joy was contagious, and for a moment, all the complications of their lives seemed distant. "This deserves a celebration," he suggested. "How about dining somewhere special tonight?" Before Julia could respond, the restaurant door opened again. Richard entered, carrying an elaborate bouquet of red roses. His confident smile faltered upon seeing Julia in another man's arms. "Seems I arrived at an inopportune moment," he commented with a forced smile, extending the flowers. "I came to bring these to celebrate your selection for the exhibition." Julia moved away from Henry, visibly uncomfortable with the situation. "How did you know about the exhibition?" "I just received the notification." "I have contacts at the foundation," Richard responded with a shrug, casting an evaluative look at Henry. "Aren't you going to introduce your friend?" Discomfort hung in the air like a dense fog. Julia hesitated for a moment before making the introductions. "Richard, this is Henry Morgan. Henry, this is Richard Peterson, an old friend." The two men exchanged a handshake, loaded with poorly disguised tension. Henry, with his Italian suit and impeccable posture, emanated a calm confidence that contrasted with Richard's studied charm in his leather jacket and carefully disheveled hair. "Morgan," Richard repeated thoughtfully. "From Morgan Developments? Interesting to find you in such a modest family restaurant. Tastes of Home has the best food and service in the city," Henry responded with a polite but firm smile. "Some pleasures are priceless." Julia observed the exchange with growing discomfort. Richard's arrival had spoiled the special moment she was sharing with Henry, and the tension between the two men was palpable. "I need to get back to work," she finally said, taking the flowers from Richard and placing them on the counter. "Thanks for the visit, Richard, and Henry, we can talk about that dinner later." As Julia moved away to attend to other customers, the two men remained in an evaluative silence. It was Richard who finally broke the impasse. "She's not from your world, you know," he said quietly with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Jules and I grew up in the same neighborhood, attended the same parties, know the same people. What do you think you can offer her besides a few moments of dazzlement with your wealth?" Henry maintained his composure, though he felt a growing anger at the provocation. "I think Julia is perfectly capable of deciding what she wants and who she wants in her life," he replied calmly. "And from what I understand, she's already made some decisions in that regard." Richard laughed, though his eyes remained cold. "For now, perhaps. But when the novelty wears off and she realizes she belongs in this world, not yours." He left, the sentence unfinished, with a confidence that deeply irritated Henry. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Donna Emily observed her daughter with concern. "Who is that man in the suit who comes here so frequently?" Julia sighed, arranging plates to serve. "That's Henry, Mum, a customer who became a friend." "Friend?" Donna Emily raised a skeptical eyebrow. "He looks at you the way your father looked at me when we met. And that other one, Richard, came back because of you, didn't he?" "It's complicated, Mum." "Life always is, honey. Just be careful. Rich men like that don't usually get seriously involved with girls of our status." Her mother's words echoed in Julia's mind as she returned to the dining room. She observed Henry and Richard, still engaged in a tense conversation, and felt the weight of the choices she would need to make. On one side, Richard represented familiarity, security, a shared past. On the other, Henry brought the promise of new possibilities, of a world she was just beginning to glimpse. That night, after the restaurant closed, Julia found a discreet envelope with her name on it on the counter. Inside, a simple card with Henry's elegant handwriting. "Your art deserves to be seen by the world, not through my influence or anyone else's, but on its own merit. Congratulations on the more than deserved selection. If you still want that celebration, dinner, I'll be waiting. H." Julia smiled, touching the card as if it were something precious. The simple words contained exactly what she needed to hear at that moment, an acknowledgement of her worth, her talent, her ability to conquer spaces on her own merit. Outside the restaurant, however, Richard observed through the window, his face a mask of determination. He wasn't willing to lose Julia to a rich businessman who probably saw her as just another trophy in his collection. He had known Julia since adolescence, knew her insecurities, her dreams, her weaknesses. And he was determined to use that knowledge to win her back, whatever it took. The celebration dinner happened at the Sky Lounge, with the city of New York stretching out at Julia's feet like a carpet of glittering lights. From her navy blue dress borrowed from a college friend to the shoes bought especially for the occasion, she had made an effort to be up to the sophisticated environment. Even so, she felt out of place among crystal glasses and silver cutlery, aware of the discreet glances that other customers cast in her direction. Henry, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease, as if dining with a panoramic view of the largest metropolis in America was part of his routine, and it probably was. What impressed Julia most, however, wasn't the dazzling scenery or the French menu she could barely pronounce, but the way Henry looked at her, as if she were the only person in that starred restaurant. "You look beautiful," he commented, after the sommelier walked away with his wine suggestions. "But you seem tense. Something wrong?" Julia hesitated, twirling the water glass between her fingers. "It's just that all of this is so different from my world. I feel like I'm playing a role in a play for which I haven't rehearsed enough." Henry smiled kindly. "There's no etiquette manual for life, Jules. We're all improvising, some just had more time to practice certain roles. But you know what I admire most about you? Your authenticity. You don't need to pretend to be someone else, to impress anyone." Those words, spoken with such sincerity, melted part of her anxiety. The conversation flowed more naturally from there, as they shared childhood stories and dreams for the future. Julia talked about her vision for the exhibition, the pieces she planned to present, the concept she was developing. Henry listened with genuine interest, asking insightful questions that helped her organize her own thoughts. "I have an idea," Henry said suddenly, after hearing Julia lament the limitations of the exhibition space. "My company owns a restored, historic building downtown that would be perfect for a solo exhibition when you're ready. It has incredible natural lighting and—" He stopped upon noticing the change in Julia's expression. "What is it? Did I say something wrong?" She placed her fork beside her plate, carefully choosing her words. "Henry, I really appreciate your generosity, but I need to do this on my own. If I accept your offers of exhibition spaces or sponsorships, I'll always wonder if my work is being recognized on its own merit or because of your influence." A heavy silence settled between them. Henry felt a mixture of shame and admiration, shame for not realizing how his offer could be interpreted, and admiration for Julia's integrity. "You're absolutely right," he finally replied. "I'm sorry. I'm so used to solving problems with money and influence that I sometimes forget that not everything can or should be solved that way." The honesty of that admission created a new layer of intimacy between them. For the first time, Julia glimpsed not just the successful businessman, but the vulnerable man behind the facade of confidence. "How can we solve this?" Henry asked, genuinely interested in finding a balance. "I want to support your dreams, but I don't want to compromise your independence or artistic integrity." Julia reflected for a moment. "How about this? You can be my friend, my confidant, even—" She hesitated, blushing slightly. "Something more if that's what we both want. But when it comes to my artistic career, I need to make my own way." Henry extended his hand across the table, intertwining his fingers with hers. "It's a fair deal. And to be completely honest, I think it's exactly that independence of yours that fascinates me so much." The rest of the dinner transpired in a bubble of complicity, as if the rest of the world had disappeared. When Henry took her home, the kiss they shared under the moonlight tasted of promise, the beginning of something neither had planned, but that both were beginning to deeply desire. The next morning, Julia woke with a sense of lightness she hadn't experienced in months. She prepared for another day of classes at college, followed by her shift at the restaurant, but something had changed. The same routine tasks now seemed imbued with a renewed purpose, as if each moment brought her closer to a more complete version of herself. Her bubble of happiness, however, was burst as soon as she arrived at college. On the bulletin board of the Visual Arts Department, several students were gathered around a newly posted notice. As she approached, Julia felt her blood freeze. It was the announcement of the exhibition at the Cooper Gallery, but with a handwritten notation in red. "Did you know Julia Evans was only selected because she has a powerful sponsor? Ask her about Henry Morgan from Morgan Developments." The buzz among colleagues ceased abruptly when they noticed her presence. Some looked away, embarrassed, while others observed her with malicious curiosity. Julia tore down the poster with trembling hands, crumpling it into a ball that she threw into the nearest trash bin. "Jules, is this true?" asked Fiona, her closest college friend. "Do you know Henry Morgan? He's one of the richest men in New York." "He's a customer at the restaurant," Julia replied, feeling her face burn. "But it has nothing to do with my selection for the exhibition." "That's not what I heard," commented a guy from the back of the group. "They say he made a considerable donation to the foundation with the specific condition that you be included." The words hit Julia like a punch to the stomach. Could it be possible? Had Henry interfered in this way, even knowing how much her artistic independence meant to her? Doubt began to corrode the confidence she had placed in him, poisoning the memory of the previous night. Unable to face more questions or speculative looks, Julia hurriedly left campus. She needed to clarify this situation immediately. Without thinking twice, she took a bus toward the financial center of the city, determined to confront Henry at his office. The imposing glass and steel tower of Morgan Developments reflected the cloudy sky of that morning, like a distorted mirror of the emotions turbulent within Julia. In the elegant reception, she was greeted by an impeccably dressed receptionist who raised an eyebrow when evaluating her simple appearance, jeans, t-shirt, and worn-out college backpack. "May I help you?" she asked with formal politeness. "I need to speak with Henry." "Morgan," Julia replied, trying to maintain composure. "My name is Julia Evans." "Mr. Morgan is in a meeting. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's important. Please, just let him know I'm here." The receptionist hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Mr. Morgan is very busy and doesn't receive people without a prior appointment. Perhaps if you'd like to leave your contact—" "It's all right, Vanessa," interrupted a male voice. "I'll attend to Ms. Evans." Mark, Henry's personal assistant, approached with a professional smile. Julia recognized him from the times he had accompanied Henry to the restaurant. "Ms. Evans, please follow me. Mr. Morgan is in a video conference with Japanese investors, but I'm sure he'll be happy to see you as soon as he's finished." Julia was led through elegant corridors to a private waiting room adjacent to Henry's office. The minimalist decoration, with contemporary artworks and designer furniture, reflected the refined taste she was beginning to recognize in the businessman. "Would you like coffee, water, tea?" offered Mark. "No, thank you, I just need to speak with him." Mark nodded and discreetly exited, leaving her alone with her tumultuous thoughts. Through the half-open door, Julia could hear Henry's voice conducting the meeting in fluent English. He seemed so at ease in that role of business leader, so distant from the vulnerable man she had met the night before. Her eyes scanned the room, stopping on a framed photograph on a side table. Henry at a charity event, surrounded by elegantly dressed people, including several stunning women who looked at him with evident admiration. The image intensified her insecurity. What was she, a simple waitress and art student, doing there, about to confront a man who moved effortlessly among millionaires and celebrities? Before she could reconsider her impulsive decision, the office door opened completely and Henry appeared, his face lighting up with genuine surprise and pleasure at seeing her. "Jules! What a wonderful surprise," he exclaimed, approaching to kiss her. Upon noticing her tense expression, he stopped. "Did something happen?" "We need to talk," she replied, her voice firmer than she felt inside. "In private?" Henry frowned, concerned, but nodded. "Of course. Let's go to my office." The spacious room with a panoramic view of the city would intimidate anyone under normal circumstances, but Julia was too focused on her indignation to be impressed. "Did you interfere with my selection for the exhibition?" she asked directly, as soon as the door closed behind them. "Did you make a donation to the foundation with the condition that they include me?" Henry's momentary hesitation was all the confirmation she needed. She felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. "Jules, it's not exactly like that." "Is it exactly like that or not?" she insisted, fighting against the tears that threatened to appear. "Please don't lie to me." Henry sighed deeply, running his hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "Yes, I made a donation, but I didn't demand your inclusion as a condition. I just suggested they consider your work." "After donating how much? 100,000? 200,000? Julia shook her head, incredulous. "Do you really think they would have the freedom to refuse the request of an important donor? The curator genuinely loved your work." Henry tried to explain, approaching. "Mariana assured me that you would have been selected regardless of my interference. And you believed that, or was it what you wanted to believe?" Julia backed away, maintaining distance. "How can I be sure now that I deserve to be in that exhibition? How will I know if people are really appreciating my art or just pleasing the powerful sponsor?" The pain in her voice was palpable, and Henry felt the weight of his mistake with devastating clarity. He had acted with the best intentions, wanting to help her achieve her dreams, but hadn't fully understood how much his intervention could harm precisely what he most admired about her, her integrity and independence. "Jules, forgive me," he pleaded, his voice choked with emotion. I was wrong. I wanted so much to see you shine that I didn't realize how my interference could compromise exactly that. How did this reach the bulletin board at my college? She asked, wiping away a stubborn tear. Now everyone is talking, questioning my merit. Henry seemed genuinely surprised and concerned. I don't know. Only Mark and the director of the foundation knew about the donation. I never imagined this would become public. A disturbing thought occurred to Julia. Richard, he mentioned he had contacts at the foundation. It must have been him. Why would he do that? Henry asked, though he already suspected the answer. To drive me away from you, Julia replied, understanding dawning as she spoke. To make me doubt both of us. The silence that followed was laden with contradictory emotions. Julia felt betrayed by Henry, manipulated by Richard, and doubtful about her own artistic value. Henry, in turn, faced the painful recognition that his privilege and power, tools he had always used with confidence, had caused harm to the very person he wanted to protect. What do we do now? He finally asked, his vulnerability evident. Julia took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. I need time, Henry, to think about all this, about us, about the exhibition. I don't know if I can or should participate knowing what I know now. Please don't give up on the exhibition because of me, he implored. Your work deserves to be seen regardless of how it got there. If you want, I can ask them to remove my name from any association with the event. It's not that simple, she replied, picking up her backpack and preparing to leave. None of this is. When Julia left the imposing Morgan Developments building, she felt simultaneously exhausted and strangely light. The confrontation had been painful, but necessary. She needed this time to reflect, to separate her growing feelings for Henry from the complex power dynamic that inevitably permeated any relationship between people from such different worlds. What she didn't know, as she walked down the busy avenue, was that someone was observing her exit from the building with calculating interest. Richard, leaning against his car across the street, smiled with satisfaction upon seeing the dejected expression on Julia's face. His strategy was working. Soon, he believed, she would realize she belonged in his world, not Henry Morgan's. The days that followed were marked by a painful silence between Julia and Henry. She didn't return his calls, and he respected her request for space, although each day, without news, deepened the wound in his chest. Tastes of home, once a refuge of authenticity in his artificial life, had become a forbidden place. Henry immersed himself in work as a form of escape, extending meetings until late at night and taking on new projects that demanded his full attention. On a particularly exhausting afternoon, Mark entered his office with a concerned expression. Mr. Morgan, you haven't left this office for almost 2 weeks, except to go home to sleep. This isn't healthy. Henry looked up from the documents he was analyzing, surprised by the unusual frankness of his assistant. We're in a critical phase of negotiation with the Chinese, Mark. I can't afford the luxury of distractions. With all due respect, sir, this has nothing to do with the Chinese. It has to do with that young woman, Miss Evans. The mention of Julia's name made Henry visibly stiffen. That's none of your business. Perhaps not, Mark continued with a courage that surprised them both. But I've worked with you for 8 years and I've never seen you like this, not even when you lost that bid to the Albuquerque group. Henry sighed deeply, running his hands over his tired face. Mark was right. He had transformed his life into work to avoid facing the emptiness that Julia's absence had created. What do you suggest, then? That I seek her out? She made it clear she needs space. If you'll excuse my boldness, sir, you didn't build a real hair-state empire by giving up at the first obstacle, Mark replied, nervously adjusting his tie. Maybe it's time to show her who Henry Morgan really is, beyond a powerful businessman. Mark's words echoed in Henry's mind long after the assistant left the room. Who was Henry Morgan beyond the powerful businessman? In recent years, he had identified so much with his professional role that he could barely separate the man from the function. Perhaps that was the real problem. Not just with Julia, but with his entire existence. That night, instead of returning to his empty apartment, Henry drove to a place he hadn't visited in years, the small house in Flatbush where he had grown up. After his parents' deaths, He had kept the property intact, unable to sell it for sentimental reasons, but equally unable to face the memories it contained. As he parked in front of the modest building, he felt a wave of contradictory emotions. It was there that he had learned the value of hard work, watching his father manage a small construction supply store. It was also there that he had dreamed of a different life, studying night after night to get into Columbia Engineering with a full scholarship. The house represented his roots, the solid foundation upon which he had built his empire, and which he had been systematically neglecting. Using the key he still carried on his keychain, he entered the silent environment. The smell of mildew and dust indicated the long period without ventilation, but beneath these layers, he could still sense the characteristic aroma he associated with his childhood. He walked slowly through the rooms, each object awakening memories: the kitchen table where his mother had helped him with homework, the small bedroom where he had spent nights elaborating ambitious plans for the future, the improvised workshop where his father had taught him to fix broken things. On a shelf in the living room, he found something he was unconsciously seeking: a photo album. He sat on the sofa covered with a protective sheet and began to leaf through the yellowed pages. There was his story, the journey of the boy from humble origins who had transformed into the powerful businessman. But among the images of graduations, first jobs and project inaugurations, there was something more: moments of simple joy, shared laughter, genuine connections. It was on that dusty sofa, surrounded by ghosts of the past, that Henry found clarity. He had lost himself along the way, confusing success with happiness, power with purpose. He needed to rediscover the man he was before the businessman took over his identity. And, more importantly, he needed to show that man to Julia, if she was still willing to get to know him. Meanwhile, Julia faced her own dilemmas. The exhibition at the Cooper Gallery was approaching, and she still hadn't decided if she would participate. On one hand, giving up meant letting go of an opportunity she had worked hard for. On the other, participating with the shadow of Henry's influence hanging over her work seemed to compromise her artistic integrity. One afternoon at the restaurant, while organizing cutlery for dinner, she was surprised by a visit from Fiona, her college friend. "You've disappeared from classes," her friend commented, sitting on a stool near the counter. "We're worried," Julia forced a smile. "I'm fine, just needed some time to think." "About the exhibition or about the Millionaire?" "Both," Julia admitted with a sigh. "It's all so complicated." "Fee, you know what I don't understand?" Fiona asked, leaning over the counter. "You're acting like he committed a heinous crime. The guy used his influence to help you. Wrong, maybe unforgivable, I don't know." "It's not that simple," Julia protested, although with each passing day she felt her initial indignation dilute, giving way to a more nuanced understanding of the situation. "It's about my independence, my value as an artist. And do you really think you didn't deserve to be in this exhibition? That your work isn't good enough?" The direct question made Julia pause. Was this what really bothered her? Not so much Henry's interference, but the doubt about her own talent that this interference had awakened. "I don't know anymore, Fee. Sometimes I think yes, other times—" "Nonsense," Fiona firmly interrupted. "Your work is incredible, and anyone with minimal knowledge of art can see that. Besides," she lowered her voice, leaning in closer, "I discovered something interesting about that poster on the bulletin board." Julia raised her eyebrows, suddenly attentive. "What?" Richard was seen talking to the building's janitor the night before. Apparently he paid for access to the department after hours. And guess what? The handwriting on the poster is identical to his. I compared it with the notes he used to make when we studied together. The revelation didn't surprise Julia as much as it should have. On some level, she already suspected Richard's interference. What surprised her was the pain she felt, not from the betrayal of an ex-boyfriend, but from the injustice she had committed with Henry, judging him so harshly while easily forgiving Richard's manipulations. "What are you going to do now?" Fiona asked. Before Julia could respond, the restaurant door opened and her father entered, leaning on a cane. George Evans, as he was affectionately known in the neighborhood, had spent the last few weeks recovering after heart surgery, rarely leaving home. "But Dad!" Julia exclaimed, running to help him. "What are you doing here? You should be resting." George smiled, his eyes shining with the same indomitable spirit he had passed on to his daughter. "I got tired of staying at home, honey. Besides, I needed to see with my own eyes how our restaurant is doing." While helping her father to a table, Julia couldn't help but notice the concerned look he cast around, evaluating the reduced movement of the establishment. "It's emptier than usual," he commented. "It's just a phase, Dad. It'll get better soon." George took his daughter's hand between his own, wrinkled by time and work. "Jules, your mother told me about this rich young man who's been coming here. Is it true he helped you with the exhibition?" Julia felt her face burn. "It's complicated, Dad. Life always is," he replied with the wisdom of years. "But you know what I learned after almost leaving this world? That pride is a luxury we can't afford. What matters in the end are the connections we make, the love we share, the hands we hold when the path gets difficult." Her father's simple words touched Julia deeply. She had spent so much time defending her independence that she might have forgotten a fundamental truth. No one builds a meaningful life completely alone. That night, after closing the restaurant, Julia finally made a decision. She would participate in the exhibition, not because Henry had interfered, but because she believed in her work. And as for him, she needed to at least hear what he had to say, give him the chance to explain his actions more completely than in the hasty confrontation at his office. She picked up her phone to call him, but was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. Upon opening the door, she found herself facing not Henry, as she secretly hoped, but Richard, holding a bottle of wine and displaying his most charming smile. "I thought we could talk," he said, entering without waiting for an invitation. "I've missed you, Jules." Something about Richard's confident presence, the way he assumed he would be welcome despite everything, ignited a spark of irritation in Julia. She watched him walk to the small kitchen of the apartment, opening cabinets, in search of glasses as if he were in his own home. "It was you who put that poster on the college bulletin board," she stated without preamble. Richard paused, the wine bottle suspended in the air, and turned slowly. For a moment it seemed he would deny it, but then his lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You needed to know the truth about your millionaire friend. He was just playing with you, Jules. Men like Henry Morgan don't get seriously involved with girls like us." "Like us?" Julia repeated, her voice laden with incredulity. "You don't even know me anymore, Richard. I've changed since you left." "Changed because a rich guy gave you attention for a few weeks?" he shot back, placing the bottle on the table with excessive force. "Wake up, Jules. You're just an exotic distraction for him. When he gets bored, he'll go back to the socialites and models of his world." Each word was like a small blade, poking at insecurities that Julia had been fighting to overcome. But instead of allowing these doubts to dominate her, she felt a crystalline clarity. Richard was projecting his own fears and limitations onto her. "I think you should leave," she said calmly. "What? For telling the truth?" "No, for trying to manipulate me, for trying to make me doubt myself and my choices, for thinking you can disappear for 6 months and come back expecting me to be exactly where you left me." The transformation in Richard's face was frightening, the studied charm giving way to barely contained anger. "You really think you have a future with him, that you'll fit into his world, that people won't laugh at you behind your back?" "I don't know what the future holds for me and Henry," Julia replied with a calmness that surprised herself. "But I know I deserve more than someone who tries to diminish me to feel bigger." When Richard finally left, slamming the door with enough force to make the walls shake, Julia felt a mixture of relief and determination. She had overcome a ghost from her past, but the future was still nebulous. One thing, however, was clear. She needed to talk to Henry, not because of him or Richard, but for herself, to understand what she really wanted, and if she had enough courage to pursue it regardless of the obstacles. She picked up her phone again, determined to call him, when she noticed a text message that had arrived while she was arguing with Richard. "I'm at the old abandoned mansion on Thompson Street. The one you mentioned would be perfect for a cafe gallery. If you can, come. I have something important to show you. H." Intrigued and nervous, Julia caught the last bus of the day heading downtown. not knowing she was on her way to an encounter that would change the course of their lives forever. The Tui. Old mansion on Thompson Street, with its Art Deco facade preserved amid modern buildings, stood out in the night landscape of downtown New York. Julia got off the bus and walked hesitantly to the address, observing the illuminated windows of what should have been an abandoned building. Her heart beat rapidly, both from the anticipation of the meeting and from the apprehension about what she might discover. The heavy carved wooden door was ajar. As she pushed it, Julia was greeted by a path of small LED lights arranged on the floor, guiding her through the spacious entrance hall. The interior of the mansion was surprisingly clean, without the signs of deterioration she expected to find in a supposedly abandoned old building. "Henry?" she called, her voice echoing slightly in the space. Following the path of lights, she reached a large salon on the second floor. She stopped at the entrance, amazed by the vision that unfolded. The space was completely transformed. Freshly painted white walls displayed several of her canvases, works she recognized from the small storage room at Tastes of Home, arranged with professional lighting that highlighted every detail of her creations. In the center of the salon, a detailed architectural model showed what appeared to be a renovation project for the mansion. Henry had his back to the entrance, adjusting the lighting on one of the larger canvases. Upon hearing her footsteps, he turned around. He was dressed with unusual simplicity. Jeans, a basic white t-shirt and sneakers, so different from the executive in impeccable suits that she had met. "You came," he said, a hesitant smile illuminating his tired face. It seemed he hadn't slept properly in days. "What is all this?" Julia asked, still trying to absorb what she was seeing around her. Henry approached slowly, as if fearing that a sudden movement might make her run away. "It's an apology and a proposal." He led her to the model in the center of the salon. The detailed model showed the mansion transformed into a multifunctional cultural space: cafe, art gallery, workshop space, and a small theater. "This building has belonged to my company for years. It was destined to be demolished to make way for another commercial development," Henry explained, his voice gaining enthusiasm as he spoke. "But then I met you, saw your work, understood your vision, and realized that New York doesn't need another skyscraper. It needs spaces that celebrate art, culture, human connection." Julia ran her fingers over the model, noticing the carefully planned details, from the cafe on the ground floor to the studios for resident artists on the top floor. "It's beautiful," she murmured, genuinely impressed. "But why show me this now?" Henry took a deep breath, like someone gathering courage for a leap into the dark. "Because I want it to be yours. Or rather, ours." The declaration caught Julia completely off guard. "What do you mean?" "In the last few days I've had a lot of time to reflect on who I am and what really matters," Henry continued, nervously running his hand through his hair. "I realized that I built an empire, but lost my essence in the process. You made me remember the idealistic young man I once was, who dreamed of building not just buildings, but communities." He guided her to a table where several documents were spread out: architectural plans, financial projections, contracts. "My proposal is simple. Transform this place into a community cultural center. The cafe on the ground floor would be managed by your family. We would solve the financial problems of Tastes of Home and expand the business. The exhibition spaces would be administered by an independent board of curators, ensuring that no external influence, not even mine, could interfere with the selection of artists." Julia studied the documents, trying to process the magnitude of the proposal. "And what would my role be in all this?" "Whatever you want," Henry replied sincerely. "You could focus exclusively on your art, or help with curation, or develop educational programs. The artistic vision would be yours. I would take care of the business part, ensuring the financial sustainability of the project." It was a tempting proposal, the realization of a dream that Julia had barely allowed herself to imagine. But something still bothered her. "And us? Is this a business proposal or—" "It's a partnership proposal," Henry gently interrupted. "In all the senses you're willing to accept. I realized I was trying to buy your affection with grand gestures, when what you really valued was authenticity and respect. He took her hands in his, the intimate gesture contrasting with the formality of the situation. "Jules, I don't want to impress you with my money or influence. I want to build something meaningful by your side, something that reflects the values you've taught me to rediscover." Julia's heart raced with the sincerity in his voice, but recent experience had taught her to be cautious. "This seems too wonderful to be true. What's the catch?" Henry smiled at the direct question. "The catch is that we would need to work together, a lot. Projects like this require commitment, shared vision, mutual trust. It would be a real partnership with everything that implies disagreements, compromises, growing together." There was a vulnerability in his eyes that Julia had never seen before. The powerful businessman was completely exposing himself, offering not just an ambitious project but his heart. "Why me?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "There are more established artists, people with more experience in cultural management, because you see possibilities where others see only problems, because your art speaks with authenticity about this city and its people, because you make me want to be a better version of myself." Henry paused, gathering courage for the final confession. "And because, against all odds and common sense, I've fallen in love with you." The declaration hung in the air between them, transforming the environment. Julia felt the weight of the words, the responsibility they carried. Part of her wanted to simply throw herself into his arms and accept everything he offered. Another part, more cautious, still hesitated. "This is a lot to process," she finally said. "The project, us, everything." Henry nodded, understanding. "I know, and I don't expect an immediate answer. In fact," he walked to a side table and picked up an envelope that he handed to her. "This is also part of the proposal." Inside the envelope, Julia found a plane ticket to Paris and an acceptance letter for a prestigious artistic residency program in the city. "I don't understand," she murmured, confused. "It's an incredible opportunity to develop your work," Henry explained. 3 months in Paris, working with some of the most respected curators and artists in the world. You mentioned once that it was your dream, so I contacted the program. They saw your portfolio and were impressed." "You're sending me away?" Julia's confusion was palpable. "On the contrary, I'm giving you space to make your decision without my presence influencing you. If you decide you want to pursue your career independently, this residency can open many doors. If you decide you want to build something with me here in New York, the mansion project will be waiting when you return." The generosity of the gesture left Julia speechless. It wasn't just a demonstration of respect for her independence, but proof that Henry had truly understood what was important to her. "And what about the exhibition at Cooper?" she asked, suddenly remembering the event that had been the catalyst for their disagreement. "The decision is entirely yours," Henry replied, "but, if I may make a suggestion, your work deserves to be seen, regardless of the circumstances that led to the selection. Don't let my mistake or Richard's manipulations prevent you from shining." The mention of her ex-boyfriend made Julia frown. "How did you know about Richard?" "Mark discovered it was him who leaked the information about my donation to the foundation. Apparently he has a cousin who works there. I'm sorry about that." Julia shook her head, processing all the new information. The whole situation, the mansion project, the residency in Paris, Richard's manipulations, the feelings confessed by Henry, seemed to belong more to a soap opera script than to her real life. "I need time to think," she finally said. "Of course," Henry replied, maintaining a respectful distance. "Take all the time you need, just one thing." He pointed to a specific canvas hung in a place of prominence. "This is my favorite. The way you captured the light in the Chinatown alleys. It's as if we could feel life pulsing through the paint." The Year was one of the first works Julia had shown him, a painting she had always particularly liked, but that she never imagined could cause such an impact on someone. The fact that Henry had chosen precisely that piece, that he had seen in it exactly what Julia had tried to express, touched her deeply. Upon leaving the mansion that night, Julia felt as if she were on the threshold of a new life. The possibilities that Henry had presented were tempting, but also frightening in their magnitude. Part of her feared she was being manipulated again, that the cultural center proposal was just another elaborate way to win her over. But another part, the one that had felt the sincerity in his words, the genuine vulnerability in his eyes, wanted to believe that she had found not just a sponsor or an admirer, but a true partner. In the days that followed, Julia oscillated between different scenarios. She talked with her family about the proposal, surprising herself with her father's immediate enthusiasm. "This young man understood the essential," George commented, after hearing the details of the project. "He's not trying to buy you or impress you. He's proposing that you build something together as equals." She also consulted her professors at college about the artistic residency in Paris, receiving unanimous confirmation about the prestige of the program. "It's an opportunity that many established artists dream of having," commented her advisor. "It would be crazy to refuse." As the date of the exhibition at the Cooper Gallery approached, Julia finally made her decision. She would participate in the event, not because Henry had interfered, but because she believed in her work and wouldn't allow the circumstances to diminish her achievement. As for the rest, the residency in Paris, the mansion project, the future with Henry, she still needed more time to decide. On the night of the exhibition opening, Julia's nervousness was at its peak. She had chosen a simple but elegant dress, and Fiona had helped her with makeup. She deliberately arrived early, wanting a few moments alone with her works before the public began to arrive. As she walked through the exhibition space, observing her canvases under the gallery's professional lighting, she felt a familiar presence. She turned and found Henry standing a few meters away, impeccable in a dark suit, observing her with an expression that mixed admiration and uncertainty. "You came," she said, echoing the words he had used at the mansion. "I wouldn't miss it for anything," Henry replied, maintaining a respectful distance. "You look stunning, and your work—" He gestured around. "They're finally receiving the stage they deserve." A comfortable silence established itself between them, filled with everything they had yet to say to each other. It was Julia who finally broke it. "I've made my decision." Henry's heart visibly accelerated, but his face remained composed, prepared for any response. "And what is it?" Before Julia could answer, they were interrupted by Richard's arrival, who approached with the confidence of someone who feels at home. He was accompanied by an older woman, whom Julia recognized as the exhibition curator. "Jules, darling," exclaimed the curator, hugging her effusively. "Your works are the highlight of the night. Richard was telling me about your relationship, how he encouraged you to pursue an artistic career." The triumphant look that Richard cast at Henry didn't go unnoticed by Julia. It was another attempt at manipulation, at rewriting the narrative in his favor, but this time she wouldn't allow it. "Actually, Dr. Mariana," Julia intervened firmly, "Richard and I haven't been together for a long time. And as for the encouragement for my career," she paused, looking directly at Henry, "I owe that to my family, my teachers, and to people who really believed in me, even when they made mistakes trying to help." The implicit message wasn't lost on any of those present. Richard visibly paled while a gleam of hope appeared in Henry's eyes. "If you'll excuse me," Julia continued, "I need to prepare to receive the guests. The exhibition begins soon." As she moved away to greet other artists who were beginning to arrive, she felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. The night that would follow would be decisive, not just for her artistic career, but for her entire future. And for the first time in a long time, she felt completely prepared to face whatever came next. The exhibition at the Cooper Gallery transformed into the cultural event of the season in New York. The elegant space overflowed with people, influential critics, avid collectors, established artists, and curious onlookers who had heard about the new sensation in New York's visual arts scene. At the center of all this attention, Julia Evans navigated among admirers with a mixture of shyness and growing confidence, explaining the techniques and inspirations behind her works. Her canvases, which portrayed urban life in New York with a unique perspective, blending realism with dreamlike elements, generated enthusiastic reactions. An important art critic compared her work to that of Georgia O'Keeffe, with a contemporary sensibility that captures the contradictory essence of the American metropolis. Others highlighted how her brushstrokes conveyed the chaotic and vibrant energy of the city while preserving the humanity of its inhabitants. From a discreet corner of the gallery, Henry observed Julia's triumph with a mixture of pride and apprehension. Seeing her shine, receiving the recognition she so deserved, confirmed everything he had always known about her talent. But the uncertainty about their future, about the decision she had mentioned before Richard's interruption, consumed him inside. "She really is extraordinary," commented a voice beside him. Henry turned to find Donna Emily, Julia's mother, observing her daughter with eyes moist with emotion. "Yes, she is," agreed Henry, surprised by the unexpected approach. "You know," continued the lady, without taking her eyes off her daughter, "when Jules was little, I worried about her dreamy ways. I thought the world would be too cruel for someone who saw beauty in everything. I tried to protect her, encourage her to choose safer paths." Henry listened attentively, sensing that this conversation had a purpose beyond simple reminiscence. "But Jules was always stubborn." Donna Emily smiled at the memory. "She kept painting, seeing the world through those special eyes. And now," she gestured to the crowded salon, to the people admiring her daughter's works, "now she's proving that the world needs precisely that different perspective." "You must be very proud," Henry commented sincerely. "I am, and grateful too." She finally turned to face him directly. "My husband told me about the mansion project, about the residency in Paris. At first, I confess I was suspicious of your intentions. Rich men don't usually take an interest in girls like my daughter without ulterior motives." The lady's frankness surprised Henry, but he appreciated her honesty. "I understand your concern. In your place, I would probably feel the same. But then I realized something," Donna Emily continued. "You're not trying to transform Jules into something she's not, or fit her into your world. You're creating a new space where you two can build something together as equals." She made a significant pause. "That says a lot about the man you are, Henry Morgan." Before Henry could respond, they were interrupted by Richard's approach, visibly altered after several glasses of champagne. "A touching scene," he commented with barely disguised sarcasm. "The millionaire winning the family's approval, almost. Cinematic." Donna Emily gave him a penetrating look. "Richard, dear, I think you've had enough to drink for today. Why don't you go home and rest?" "You don't understand," Richard insisted, his voice slightly slurred. "He's using you." "Using Jules? That's what people like him do. They play with others' feelings because they can, because they have money, to repair any damage they cause." Henry remained calm, though he felt his blood boil. "This is neither the time nor the place, Richard. Let's not ruin Julia's moment." "Oh, now you care about her?" Richard laughed bitterly. "After manipulating her exhibition, playing with her dreams?" The discussion was beginning to attract curious looks. Henry realized he needed to interrupt the situation before it escalated and compromised Julia's night. "Let's talk outside," he firmly suggested, guiding Richard by the arm to the gallery's garden, away from the guests. Donna Emily followed them, concerned about where the situation was heading. In the fresh night air, Richard seemed to partially regain sobriety. "You don't deserve her," he said, facing Henry with hostility. "You don't know her story, her struggles, her dreams like I do." "Maybe you're right," Henry replied, with surprising humility. "Maybe I don't deserve her, but it's not up to me, to you, or to anyone else to decide that. It's her choice." "And you think she would choose someone like you if it weren't for your money, your influence? What do you really have to offer besides that?" The question hit Henry like a punch to the stomach, touching his own deepest insecurities. Before he could formulate a response, a voice interrupted the confrontation. "The answer to that question concerns me, not you, Richard." Julia approached, her presence immediately transforming the dynamics of the situation. She was radiant in her moment of triumph, emanating a confidence that neither man had seen before. "Jules," Richard tried to explain himself, "I was just trying to protect me, control me, decide what's best for me," Julia completed, her voice firm but controlled. "That's what you've always done, isn't it? Pretend you're thinking of my well-being when, in fact, you're just projecting your own fears and insecurities." The frankness of the observation left Richard visibly shaken. Julia continued, now addressing Henry. "And as for you, you also made mistakes trying to help me in the wrong way, but the difference is that you recognize those mistakes, learned from them, and are trying to do better." She looked at both men, then at her mother, who observed the scene with a mixture of concern and pride. Finally, with the certainty of someone who made a decision after much reflection, Julia focused again on Richard. "You were important in my life, Richard, but our time has passed. Please, respect that and move on." The finality in her words made it clear there was no room for argument. Richard seemed to wilt in the face of the definitive rejection, all his previous bravado dissipating like smoke. "You'll regret it," he murmured, but without the previous conviction. "When the novelty wears off, when you realize you don't belong in his world." "We don't belong in each other's world," Julia interrupted him. "We're creating our own world. There's a fundamental difference there that you seem unable to understand." With that, Richard finally walked away, defeated not by Henry's financial superiority, but by Julia's clarity and determination. Donna Emily discreetly followed him, ensuring he left the event without causing further disturbances. Finally alone, Henry and Julia found themselves in a moment of truth, all previous pretenses, doubts, and misunderstandings dissipated by the confrontation that had just occurred. "You mentioned a decision," Henry gently reminded. "Before we were interrupted?" Julia smiled, extending her hand to touch his face with gentleness. "Yes, and now I can finally share it with you. I'm going to accept the residency in Paris." Henry felt a tightness in his chest but nodded, determined to support her choice regardless of his own desires. "I understand. It's an extraordinary opportunity for your career." "But," Julia continued, her eyes shining with a quiet certainty, "when I return, I want to build the cultural center in the mansion with you, as partners in every sense." The joy that flooded Henry was so intense that for a moment he was speechless. Finally, he managed to articulate, "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel pressured in any way." "I've never been so sure of something in my life," Julia replied with conviction. "These last few months have taught me a lot, about art, about relationships, about myself. I learned that independence doesn't mean isolation, that accepting support doesn't diminish my worth or my ability. And mainly," she took a step forward, reducing the distance between them, "that some connections are too rare to be wasted because of fear or pride." Henry pulled her into his arms, finally allowing himself to fully express the feelings he had been controlling. "I'm going to miss you so much during these 3 months." "And I'll miss you," Julia replied, resting her head on his chest. "But when I return, we'll have all the time in the world to transform that mansion into the most incredible cultural space New York has ever seen." The intimate moment was interrupted by a discreet throat clearing. It was Mark, Henry's assistant, looking embarrassed for interrupting. "Sorry, Mr. Morgan, but the press is looking for Miss Evans. Apparently, 3 international galleries have expressed interest in her work and want to interview her." Julia's eyes widened, the news catching her completely by surprise. "Seriously?" Henry smiled, absolutely not surprised by the recognition she was beginning to receive. "Go. Your audience awaits. We'll talk later." With a quick kiss, Julia returned to the main hall, ready to face the new wave of attention her art was generating. Henry watched her walk away, amazed by the transformation he saw. The shy waitress he had met months ago now moved with the confidence of an artist who had finally found her voice. "She really is extraordinary, isn't she?" commented Mark, following his boss's gaze. "More than you can imagine," Henry replied, a permanent smile on his face. 3 months can seem like an eternity or the blink of an eye, depending on perspective. For Julia, her residency in Paris was a roller coaster of emotions. The excitement of working with renowned artists, the anxiety of being away from home for the first time, the longing for Henry mixed with the freedom to explore her artistic potential without distractions. They maintained daily contact through video calls, messages, and detailed emails. Henry updated her on the progress of renovations at the mansion, sending photos and revised plans for her approval. Julia shared her new artistic experiments, the techniques she was learning, the inspirations she found in the Parisian streets. The distance, instead of weakening their connection, strengthened it in unexpected ways. Without each other's physical presence, they focused on building deep communication, based on shared interests and visions for the future. When they disagreed about some aspect of the cultural center project, which happened with some frequency, they learned to navigate these differences with mutual respect, reaching compromises that incorporated the best of both their ideas. In Paris, Julia flourished as an artist. Her unique perspective on urbanity, informed by her experience in New York, resonated strongly with European critics and collectors. At the end of the residency, she was invited to participate in a collective exhibition at the Centre Pompidou, an extraordinary honor for an artist early in her career. Meanwhile, in New York, Henry embarked on his own journey of transformation. Meetings with contractors and architects for the mansion project were interspersed with regular visits to Tastes of Home, where he helped George and Donna Emily plan the transition to the new space. The more he involved himself with Julia's family and the local community, the more he rediscovered parts of himself that he had neglected in his rise to success. When the day of Julia's return finally arrived, Henry waited for her in the arrival hall of JFK Airport with a bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite flowers. The sight of her emerging through the arrival gate, more confident and radiant than ever, confirmed everything he already knew. He had found not just love, but a partner for life. "Welcome back," he said simply, enveloping her in an embrace that communicated everything words couldn't express. "It's good to be home," Julia replied, nestling in his arms. Instead of taking her directly home, Henry had a surprise. "There's something I need to show you first." The mansion on Thompson Street, which 3 months earlier was just an ambitious project in a model, was now almost unrecognizable. The historic facade had been carefully restored, preserving its original Art Deco beauty. Inside, spaces once empty or deteriorated had been transformed with architectural sensitivity that respected the original structure while creating functional environments for their new purpose. "This is incredible," Julia murmured, slowly. Walking through the ground floor spaces, the cafe was almost ready, with state-of-the-art equipment harmoniously coexisting with rustic elements reminiscent of Tastes of Home. "We managed to hit the perfect balance between modernity and tradition." "We did," Henry agreed, emphasizing the plural. "Every decision was made together, remember, even with you thousands of miles away." As they climbed to the second floor, where the main exhibition space would be, Julia noticed something different in the center of the still-empty salon, a small table set for two, with candles, flowers, and a bottle of champagne. "What is this?" she asked, intrigued. "Our first official dinner in the new space," Henry replied with a smile. "I thought it would be appropriate to celebrate this new phase together, exactly where it all began." As they enjoyed the meal specially prepared for the occasion, they shared stories of the 3 months apart, the small victories, the challenges overcome, the moments of doubt, and those of absolute clarity. The conversation flowed as naturally as always, but there was a new dimension of mutual understanding, forged by distance and shared commitment to the project now taking shape around them. "I have something for you," Julia suddenly said, opening her suitcase to remove a carefully wrapped package. "I painted this in the last weeks in Paris." Henry unwrapped the gift to reveal a canvas that left him speechless. It was a representation of the mansion, but not as it existed in the present. It was a vision of the future. In the painting, the building pulsed with life. People of all ages entered and exited. Artists worked in spaces visible through the windows. The cafe overflowed with activity, and on top of the building, a glass roof housed what appeared to be a lush community garden. "This is how I see our future," Julia explained softly. "Not just a cultural space, but a true meeting point, a place where art, gastronomy, and community intertwine." Henry observed every detail of the painting, noticing how Julia had precisely captured the essence of their shared dream. In the lower right corner, almost imperceptible at first glance, two small figures observed the scene, clearly them, contemplating their joint creation. "It's perfect," he murmured, moved. "Exactly as I imagined, but better, because it came through your eyes." In that moment, seated in a building that symbolized both their past and their future, Henry and Julia sealed with a kiss the commitment they had built, not just to each other, but to the shared vision of uniting their seemingly distant worlds to create something unique and meaningful. 6 months later, the Thompson Cultural Center opened its doors to the public in a ceremony that attracted artists, business people, politicians, and local residents. The space quickly established itself as a reference point in the New York cultural scene, offering exhibitions by emerging artists, educational workshops, theatrical performances, and, of course, the Tastes of Home Cafe, managed by the Evans family with the same care and authenticity as the original restaurant. The success of the venture spread beyond the borders of New York. International publications highlighted the innovative model that combined business, art, and social responsibility. Investors and cultural entrepreneurs from other American cities began to seek out Henry and Julia for guidance on similar projects. For Julia, the Cultural Center provided not just a space to exhibit her own work, but a platform to promote other artists with stories similar to hers, extraordinary talents from humble origins who needed just an opportunity to shine. Her artistic residency program, modeled on her own experience in Paris, became especially prestigious, attracting candidates from all over the United States. Henry, in turn, found in the project a purpose that transcended the simple accumulation of wealth. The Cultural Center inspired a new direction for his real estate ventures, the preservation and revitalization of historic buildings for cultural and community purposes. His approach became a case study in business sustainability and corporate social responsibility. As for Richard, he eventually moved on. After a few months of frustrated attempts to interfere in Julia and Henry's relationship, he accepted an offer to manage a restaurant in New Orleans. The latest news indicated that he had found his own path, away from the shadows of the past. On a quiet afternoon, as they observed the movement in the cafe from the second-floor mezzanine, Julia and Henry reflected on the journey that had brought them there. "Did you ever imagine that day when you entered Tastes of Home escaping from traffic would completely change your life?" Julia asked, intertwining her fingers with his. Henry smiled, contemplating the vibrant space below them, families sharing meals, students discussing art, artists sketching ideas in notebooks. "No, but now I can't imagine my life following any other path." The Thompson Cultural Center became more than a successful venture or a prestigious gallery. It transformed into the physical manifestation of a truth that Henry and Julia had discovered together: that the barriers between different worlds, rich and poor, business and artistic, traditional and innovative, are more permeable than they seem, and that the most meaningful connections often happen precisely in the spaces where these worlds meet. For an artist waitress and a lonely businessman, the unlikely encounter in a small family restaurant had been just the beginning of a